Hey, and welcome back to another Learning Java 2D Game Programming video. So, in our last video, we made some touch-ups. We started using all of the different people that we have, the art that we have currently, and as you could see, we had this little walking in part. They now walk in different speeds. We have the background music, it's on a loop. We have this little sound when we blow bubbles around people. Just little things. And so today I am thinking let's move on to starting our map editor so that we can have something prettier in the background to look at. Alright, the first thing I'm gonna do is, of course, let's create a state for it. So in the states package, let's make a new package. I'm gonna call it editor. And in here, let's make a Java class, call it editor state. And this is a state. All right, super duper. Maybe we can just start by adding, let's make a UI package as well. Inside of here, I'm gonna put a UI editor button panel. UI editor button menu. Maybe we don't need to say editor because it's in the editor UI package, so that's implied. All right, let's just call it this for now, and we can always rename it if we want to. And it's gonna be a vertical, no, horizontal container. Let's start with a horizontal container. So what this is gonna contain is just a button to go back to the main menu. Later it's gonna have the button for saving and maybe loading and whatever we want. Today we're just gonna be able to go back to the main menu. All right, so let's just add UI component, new UI button. Let's say main menu, and when we click it, we do state, set next state, new UI new menu state is what we want. This takes the window size, the input, and the game settings. So we have that in the state that we come from. Let's get the window size from the camera because it's the same size. Let's get the input. Let's get the state, get game settings. All right, so now in the editor state, let's add that UI component, UI containers, add new UI button menu. And it takes the window size. Also, as you may remember, it's gonna give us an exception if we don't give it some sort of game map to start with. So let's also do that. And we also need a button to get into this editor state. So we need to find the UI main menu. I'm just gonna copy the play one and then change orders of options. This is gonna be editor, and the next state will be the editor state. All right, let's try that out. Here is the menu. We have a new button, and when we click it, we come to our new editor state, which is currently just completely empty, but we have a button to take us back to the main menu. So that was awesome. That's exactly what we want. The thing that we're gonna do today is in the editor, we wanna see a grid, right? So we're just gonna do a grid, which will mean that we need some sort of checkbox component, which will let us know, do we want to render the grid or do we not want to render the grid? So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do a checkbox and we're gonna be able to render a grid. All right. In order to do this, let's see, where do we want to start? Let's start at the settings. So just like we made audio settings, I'm gonna make another one called render settings. So in here, we can have a setting called like should render grid or something like that. However, what I would like to do, I would like to pass the setting that the checkbox component is controlling. I want to pass the setting to our checkbox object, and therefore we can't store this as a primitive type. We can't store it as a Boolean because they will have, their own place in memory. They'll never point to the same thing. We can initialize it with the value from here, but we would have to write specific code to go in here and set the value, and then get the value again. So to make this easier, we need to wrap it inside our own object, basically, so that we can point to the same object instead. So let's make an object called setting, a class called setting, and I'm actually gonna let this be generic. So it's gonna have a private t value, and then make a constructor, and also make getters and setters. So this is all that we're gonna do today. I mean, now we can have other things in here if we want to, but now we have an object which is just wrapping our value. We can also specify what value we will have. So eventually when we have settings that might be strings, or I don't know, enums maybe, we can have that as well. And we can say that the checkbox needs a setting of type Boolean. So let's go back here and say that we now have a private, and this will probably also be able to be final. So we have a private final setting of type Boolean. Let's call it should render grid. I wonder if that's is that too verbose? Is grid enough? Because we could have settings which are like maybe grid color or something. No, it's quite verbose, but should render grid, not should render, should. There we go. I'm gonna say that for now anyway. I'm not gonna take anything into the render settings, but I am gonna set it to a new setting, and I'm gonna say false by default. All right, we also need a getter. All right, now we have the render settings. Awesome. I'm just gonna close that off, and I'm gonna go into the game settings, and this will want a private render settings, And this is probably saying that this can be final, so let that be final, and this will be able to be final as well. And now we need to set it. So render settings is a new render settings. Awesome. We need a way to get it, so let's make a getter. All right, out of the game settings, out of the main menu, the editor state, we have the setting. We should start with our UI checkbox now. All right. I'm gonna go into this UI package, and in the clickable, I'm gonna make a new Java class. This is gonna be a UI checkbox. And the thing is, I want the checkbox to have the actual box as well as the label, but I don't want the label to be clickable. Maybe you do, and if you do, then this should extend clickable, and then all of the click logic that we have, or the mouse logic, it will apply to the entire component, but I don't want that. So therefore, I'm actually gonna let this be a UI component instead. And we're gonna cheat just a little bit. I still want my box to be a clickable, so we're actually gonna have a private class in here, and it's gonna be static. A private static class, I'm gonna call it checkbox, and it will extend UI clickable. And now this will have to implement some methods. All right, we're gonna do nothing on focus, we're gonna do nothing on drag. This checkbox will contain a setting of type Boolean, and I'm just gonna call it setting. So alt insert, make a constructor. We take in the setting, and also we're gonna need a label. So, sorry, getting ahead of myself. The point is this checkbox doesn't have the label. This has the label. the UI checkbox. This is just an inner class. All right, but what will happen when we click it? We want the setting set value to be whatever the setting get value isn't. So the inverse of the setting. Just toggle the setting, right? And we're gonna do some stuff with the sprites. Let's keep a color in here like we do in other places. And I'm gonna set the color to something at first. I'm gonna set it to color gray. We're all about the grayscale, right? So let's override the update method. Public void update state. Super update with the state, never forget. Let's set the color to if setting get value, then let's do color white. Because I feel like we have started this pattern, right? When things are true or when we are using stuff, I don't know, they're white. And otherwise, let's just make it gray. All right, but now if has focus, if we have focus, then the color will be light gray. If we are pressing, is pressed, then the color will be dark gray. All right, and now we need a sprite. So we're gonna need to set the size. So let's say that size is equal to a new size, and I think that 20 by 20 will be good, maybe? We can see and change that later. Now we need to make the sprite. So you've all done this before. Let's create ourselves a sprite. Whoop, sorry, don't know how I did that even. Let's import that buffered image and say cast it to a buffered image. Image utils, create compatible image of the size that we have, and bitmasked alpha. Let's get the graphics out of that. Sprite, create graphics. All right, now we want to paint on this, but we will do it differently, of course. We can first set the color, because that's already taken care of. Now, if the value is true, then we want to fill ourselves. We want to fill the entire sprite with the color that we have. So let's see. Graphics, fill rect. And the entire sprite. Size get height. But if the value is false, we just want to draw the outline. So draw rect. And we start at 0, 0. We go to size get width -1 and size get height -1. Otherwise, it goes the entire width, so all the way, and then it draws a 1 pixel border like to the right of it. So it tries to move even further. The 1 pixel that it draws, we could have set the stroke to something else, but the 1 pixel that it draws further out. So basically this just means that it will be seen. It will be inside our image size. All right, so we have set that. Now let's dispose of this graphics and return our sprite. I think this will be good for now. Also, this obviously doesn't need to be public. I think this can be private since we are inside, we're an inner class. So our UI checkbox now is a UI component. It will need a UI container for us to place the checkbox into. So I'm just gonna call this container, and I'm gonna make that, sorry. And let's also keep, do we need to keep something else? Well, we need to keep the actual checkbox, do we? We might not need to. let's wait. If we do, also we don't take this in. But the container will be a new horizontal container. And this needs some size, and since this is not a top level container, this size doesn't matter, and we should refactor that at some point. It's still not today. Just give it an empty size. It will be fine. All right, so inside of this container, we need to take in the value and the label. So let's say string label, and then setting, boolean, setting. All right, so in the container, let's add UI component, new checkbox, and it wants the setting. So let's give it the setting. And then let's add a text of this label. So that should be fine. And here is the little cheat that we're gonna do. So we are going in the update. Let's do container update. And then we want, let's see, we want to say that this UI component size is going to be the size of the container. So the container is really all of the content of this UI component. So let's just say that size is equal to container get size. But also the container is currently thinking that it's a top level container because it has no parent. So we need to set the parent to our parent. Also, let's set the absolute position because our parent is currently doing our absolute position. And since this is basically just a wrapper for this container, then the absolute position of our component should also be the absolute position of the container. So I think that is okay. And when we get the sprites, we just want to pass on the sprite of our container. All right, so we have quite a lot of things going on here, and we want to check those out. So let's go to our editor state and the UI. I'm going to make a new UI class here. I'm going to call it UI render settings. And this will be a vertical container. And I'm just gonna first add UI component, new UI text. I'm gonna call it render settings. And then let's add a UI component, UI checkbox. And this render settings is gonna need to take in the render settings, well, the actual settings, so that we can bind the values here. So it's gonna need a label. Let's call this grid. And now it needs a value. So let's do render settings get should render grid. All right, I think this is good. We just need to, I want to set the alignment on this. Set alignment to a new alignment. I'm going to say at the end and then at the start. So at top right corner is where this settings is going to be. And then let's just add that container. New UI render settings of the window size, and we need to get the render settings for it as well. So let's try that out and see what that looks like. All right, so it's working. However, I want some margin between these. Let's set, for this checkbox, let's set a default margin. And I'm gonna say 0, 10, 0, 0, because I only want it for the right. So top, right, bottom, left. So 10 pixels to the right of empty space, please. Was that too much? Do we want a little less? Or is it okay? I'm just gonna try 5. All right, maybe fine was good. All right, let's see if we can. How much time have I used? Oh my Jesus, a lot of time. But we want a grid, so let's make a really fast grid. All right, let's go into the renderer. And here we have the render map, and the grid is part of the map. So let's do it here. We've also already gotten the start and end positions. So, I mean, to get something really quick going, I guess we could just, inside of here, first we draw the image, then let's just draw a rectangle on top of that. So let's first set a color. I'm gonna do gray. And then I'm gonna do graphics.draw rect. And we wanna start at, so here's where we wanna start, right? And then we need the size, which will just be game.spritesize, game.spritesize. All right, so I think this should be enough to just draw basic. This is very inefficient now because, oh yeah, right, okay. So we obviously, so it worked. We want to say if, do we have the settings here? We have the state, okay. Get game settings, get render settings, should render grid. And we probably need to get the value. So if we should render it, then let's do this. And as I said, this is very inefficient. Right now we're drawing just a rectangle on every grid where we could just draw the lines. So we might fix that later, but to have something quick today so that we can see our UI checkbox in action. How cool is that? Oh my gosh. So we bound our settings to this UI checkbox and it's working great. I'm really happy with this actually. All right, this will have to be it for today's video. Thank you for watching and I will see you soon. Hej då!